Greetings. How's it going? I hope that your holidays, in whatever way that you celebrated them, were filled with friends, family, hopefully some rest, lots of joy, and maybe some great food as well. Maybe you traveled, and I hope you had some wonderful adventures if so. This is the exclusive career podcast, and my name is Lisa Edwards. I am the CEO of the exclusive career. I have these two podcasts. So this one we're going to be talking always about career management, leadership development, workplace issues, anything around propelling your career in the right way for whatever you aspire to. My other podcast, Exclusive Career Coach, is focused on job search related issues. And the last episode, which was last year, was on how to improve your resume for applicant tracking systems. And that's actually going to be a two-part series. So first part came out last week. The next part comes out next week. And I'm covering specifics on what you need to do to your resume to score higher with the applicant tracking system based on the latest technology. Um, and so this week we're going to talk about the Global Workplace Wellbeing Inventory, which is conducted annually by the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator organization. Now, to before your eyes glaze over or your ears glaze over, I'm not going to go into detail about what this survey said. What I really looked for, and there was a lot of stuff that was interesting to me because I am a master practitioner of the Myers-Briggs, which is the world's most widely used personality inventory. So it is a psychological tool that I am, again, a master practitioner of. But rather, what I wanted to do was tease out what I thought would be interesting to those of you specifically in leadership positions in terms of how to make your workplace a more well-being workplace and what that really means. Research is conducted between 2016 and 2024 to figure out what workplace well-being factors were. And I wanted to give you those because I think that's an important framework. And there's an acronym for this. So the first one is positive emotions, which is feelings of happiness, frequently, feeling content, pleasure. So positive emotions. The next one is relationships, mutual feelings of caring, support, and satisfaction. So we've got positive emotions, relationships. The next one is engagement, a deep psychological connection and absorption in an activity or cause. So you are engaged at work. Positive emotions, relationships, engagement. The next one is meaning. So there is a sense of purpose and direction, which of course is a very personal thing. Someone can get meaning out of work, whereas another person wouldn't find meaning in that same work. So meaning is another one. And then accomplishment. So success or mastery for its own success, own sake, rather. So this sense of achieving something, accomplishing a goal, learning something new, mastering something. The next one, number six, is negative emotions, low levels of anxiety, pessimism, and depression. So obviously, we want high of all of the other ones and low negative emotions. So positive emotions, relationships, engagement, meaning, accomplishment, negative emotions. And the workplace model or the acronym is PREMAN, which is the first letter of all of those, PREMAN. And as I said, I don't want to get in the weeds about this, but I also don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the four preference pairs of the Myers-Briggs, other than what I need to discuss to talk about the recommendations or kind of the what's in it for me of this survey. I have done in my other podcast a breakdown. I did a four-part series. I think it was actually more than four parts of the four preference pairs of the Myers-Briggs. So extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. Overall, the survey found that there has been a trend to more positive well-being since the lowest ratings in 2021. Of course, COVID threw everything for a loop. But in 2024, which is this survey, the most recent survey, obviously 2025 hasn't come out yet, measures were lower than the years prior to COVID. So, what's going on there? the survey felt like what the results were saying was that workplace well-being hasn't returned to pre-pandemic levels, and that there is a slight increase in people reporting more negative emotions in 2024 compared to 2022 and 2023. So apparently it's not just the absence of or the lesser degree of the positive emotions, but it's also some higher reporting of negative emotions. And this can possibly be due to different samples every year. They're not measuring the same exact people each time. But it can also be, let's face it, here in the United States, and that's where this survey is looking at. Um, there's a lot of things going on in the wider society which can be contributing to this. In other words, maybe workplace isn't always the cause of the lesser workplace well-being feelings. So then the report gave 13 recommendations. There were actually a few more, and I kind of condensed, felt like some of them were repetitive or just frankly vague. So I came up with 13 of their recommendations that I wanted to share. And this is at the organizational level. So those of you who are leaders, what can you do at the organizational level, at the department level, whatever you manage, whatever you lead to improve well-being? So, number one was to treat workplace well being as a long term organizational strategy. It's not a one off initiative, it can't be a flavor of the month kind of thing. The findings highlighted that well being can and should be monitored over time, and we're going to talk about how that might happen. You want to be able to detect important changes in the well being of your staff that are likely going to affect organizational performance and reputation. And the way I like to think of this is if we go back to the model that I have talked about a lot on the other podcast, it all starts with your thinking, right? You have this neutral circumstance. So let's say the circumstance is whatever's going on in the workplace that could generate some emotions, negative or positive. A certain boss, a certain maybe financial result, whatever. And then it's what people think about that result that then affects, or think about that situation that affects the results they're going to get. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying that oftentimes I think in organizational development and people who are looking at this, if they're looking at it at all, are looking at the actions that are happening. What performance has gone down. We need to, streamline, make less steps to this piece of equipment, or we need to fire this person or whatever. Whereas we're not going far enough up the ladder to what is happening with their thoughts, which is directly affecting their well-being, that is leading to this. So that's number one. It has to be a long-term organizational strategy. Number two, you want to incorporate workplace well-being metrics into regular performance reviews. So whether this is someone that is in-house or an industrial organizational psychologist, organizational development person, who can you bring in, who can you contract with, who is already on in-house that can set up the metrics and then regularly measure them. What are the tools we're going to use to measure and get these metrics? And then how are we going to disseminate that information, and what decision making factors are we going to consider in possibly making changes? So you have to have metrics. You have to measure this over time. The next one is support emotional intelligence, EQ development across the workforce. This is so important, and this is tied into workplace well-being. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. Emotional intelligence development. It cannot just be about the best way to, put the widget in the whatever. It has to be about those emotional developments, emotional intelligence development skills. The next one, deliver that EQ training focused on self-awareness, self-regulation, and interpersonal skills. Those are just as important as knowing how to do the job that you're hired to do. Next, include tailored development based on personality type. Now, I want to be clear in saying this is a report coming out from the Myers-Briggs Type Indication Type Indicator organization, meaning, of course, they're going to favor the Myers-Briggs as the answer to the problem. I happen to agree. I happen to think that there's a lot of assessments out there that are much less detailed, and much less, the results are not as granular. So some suggestions here would be you've got introverts in your group. When you know who they are, how can you support them with energy management and reflection? And this can be everything from where their desks are to the tasks they're asked to do to, helping them to schedule breaks when there's been group meetings and that kind of thing. And then also things like extroverts tuning into emotional nuance, right? So are the extroverts not picking up on nonverbal cues? Is there a way to help them with that? The next one is personalized well-being support using those personality insights. And I kind of talked about that a little bit. And of course, I'm not suggesting that you test everybody in the organization and then you work out an individual plan for each person and you monitor it very closely. We don't have time for that. But I do think that there are some larger scale things. And even if you don't give the assessment, if you say, hey, here's an opportunity for those of you that need some quiet time to go do this. The people who know they need the quiet time can choose to take advantage of that. So there's a couple of ways to, as they say, skin the cat. The next one is using personality types like the MBTI to help managers and teams better understand and support each other's well-being in ways that meet the needs of their personality preferences. One of the things that I used to do before I moved to Florida, I haven't done it as much down here in Florida, but quite frequently I was called into organizations or like groups, like leadership development groups that are run by the Chamber of Commerce to help them learn about themselves better. We would spend the morning with kind of self-awareness, and then the afternoon was understanding the group better. And we would, if I was called into an organization, the activities that we would do in the afternoon were always based around whatever the quote unquote problem was that the person who reached out to me said. We are not communicating well. There's a lot of dissension. The group is more, competitive than collaborative, and we need them to be more collaborative. We need to be developing future leaders, whatever the problem was. And then there are lots of activities with the Myers-Briggs, and I would build ones around what their specific issues were. So when you are able to take the MBTI out of just the one-on-one arena and bring it into a work team, a work unit, a work department, to help them support each other, that is completely next level and amazing. And it's not a one-off thing, which I said a moment ago. It has to be an ongoing initiative of the organization. The next one is tailor well-being interventions to different types. So, for example, perceivers, the folks who like a lot more flexibility, less definition of roles and how to do those roles, they want autonomy. So, how can we tailor interventions that give them autonomy? How can we give more structure to the other side, the judgers, the judgment preference, so that they know exactly what's expected of them, how they will be evaluated in their performance, how they are to proceed with the task at hand? The next one is strengthen self-management capability through leadership development and coaching and programs. So, what this is saying is, are we in the coaching that we're doing, in the leadership development, whatever programs we are currently offering or considering, are we essentially at the end of the day strengthening the self-management abilities of the people that we lead? Are we helping them to ultimately do these things for themselves? Next, offer access to coaching or leadership workshops focused on self-regulation and stress management. Two big ones. Self-regulation. What does that mean? It might mean having better time management. It might mean impulse control. Stress management, I think that's pretty obvious. Next one. Foster positive interpersonal relationships at work. And this is one that's pretty vague, but it can mean a lot of things, but it's so important. Positive interpersonal relationships at work are one of the major factors in a feeling of workplace well-being. The next one, provide team building and relationship building opportunities to enhance emotional management and behavioral impact. Take that one out. The next one and the final one, encourage leaders to recognize and respond to employee emotional cues. And this is particularly important for people. So, for employees that have a feeling preference, they make their decisions with their heart. They are going to be more likely to wear their emotions on their sleeve. And if there is a leader in that group that it's all business, we don't talk about our personal lives, you can see where that disconnect would be. I was actually coaching someone yesterday who is stepping into a new position. He's a very high level senior sales leader, and his new boss for the first time in his career is a woman. And this is in an industrial environment. And so we talked little bit about the fact that she may have a preference for feeling, because 75% of women in the United States do, and how he might have to step out of his comfort zone a little bit in order to talk about things that aren't necessarily just about work in order to connect better with his new boss. And of course, I painted that with a very broad brushstroke because we don't know. But there's a good chance that she has a preference for feeling. So, encouraging leaders to recognize and respond to employee emotional cues while also demonstrating the benefits of considering how emotions contribute to objective outcomes for those with the thinking preference. They make their decision with their head. So, you've got one group of people where you need to be aware of the fact that if they seem, let's call it, out of sorts, there is something that is going to keep them from performing at their best. And to ignore it is really at your own peril, right? And then on the other flip side, you have these thinkers, and you want to help them to understand that emotions do contribute, right? They're not going to see it that way. And so if Sally is over here, or John, whoever, is having a really rough day emotionally, this may not be how you show up at work, but it's affecting them and we need to help them. All right. So here we have individual employee strategy. So what can the individual employees do? And this, of course, ultimately comes to the boss to develop the systems, processes, whatever, to make this happen. But this gets down that self-regulation. That's eventually where you want to get, is where the individual employee is taking care of themselves largely. So, number one, develop self awareness and monitor emotional triggers. Monitor yourself, know and be willing to, have a conversation when needed. The next one is use those self-assessment tools like the MBTI to understand individual emotional responses that help or hinder performance and well-being. And I want to stop on this one for a minute because this was a huge, what do I want to call it? Like a light bulb came on when I first took the Myers-Briggs. Now we're going back almost probably 25 years ago now. And I was able to recognize that some parts of me that I had always kind of been a little ashamed of, and I'll give you a specific one here in a minute, kind of tried to hide. It flipped the script for me and helped me to understand. And the one was that I have a preference for feeling. I'm actually, and you won't know what this means unless you work with the Myers-Briggs, I'm extroverted feeling dominant. And when you have someone who is extroverted feeling dominant, they wear their heart on their sleeve. Consequently, I have a saying, no one cries alone in my presence. I can be flipping through the channels, and it does not matter who these people are. They could be mass murderers. And if they're emotional and they're getting married and they're tearing up, I'm tearing up. I'm so emotive about that. And instead of thinking of it as a character flaw, I realized that that was part of what makes me me, and has made me so relatable to people, so compassionate to people. People open up to me. And so I saw it as a superpower after I understood my personality type rather than a character flaw. And so having that kind of a structure, I will tell you, I have heard horror story upon horror story of people who've come to my workshops for the Myers-Briggs who have had the workshops before. They've done the Myers-Briggs with other leadership, other people, and it was used as a weapon in the workplace rather than a developmental tool. Terrible. All right, next. Use proven methods for monitoring and managing strong emotional responses, such as keeping a reflective journal to track patterns in mood and energy, or use third person self coaching. Now, looking at yourself from outside of yourself, I think this one's a really good one for someone who you might, as a leader, you might see potential with them, but there is at least in your opinion, maybe outsized emotional responses that need to be reined in a little bit. You're not trying to change the person, you're trying to sort of bring that emotional response to center a little bit more. And so, suggesting that they keep a reflective journal, and you would want to give them a little bit more instruction on that to track their patterns, like make some connections between their exercise, their sleep, their food intake. What are they eating? How much are they eating? Could be really useful. Another one, apply evidence based techniques such as mindfulness, cognitive reappraisal, which is changing the way you think about a situation to change how you feel about that situation. Or strategic emotional distraction, redirecting a negative reaction to a neutral or positive reaction. Now, there was a lot in that one, so I want to break that down a little bit. The cognitive reappraisal is really some of the work that I do with clients. So, for example, if someone is coming in thinking, I am unemployable, and of course, they don't come in and they say, my thought in my head, Lisa, is I'm unemployable. But it comes out as I meet with them, as I have a consult with them, it becomes obvious. I'm actually working with someone right now that has a lot of negative self-talk, and it is absolutely affecting what she is doing in her job search. So changing the way she thinks will change how she feels, which will change the actions that she takes, which will change the results that she gets. So she is thinking negative things about herself as a candidate, her qualifications, her work experience, and that's going to affect everything. So when we can change the thought, we can change the feeling. And then the emotional distraction is, okay, let's just go back to that example. I'm not employable. I don't recommend that clients try to go from I'm employable to I'm the best employee that's ever lived. That's 180 degrees, and they will not believe it. But can we go from I'm not employable to a baby step, a ladder step? I have been employable before. I am currently employable. I'm currently employed if they are. Um, or they might talk about, I've had 3 interviews so far, right? It might be evidence based. So we're not trying to go 180 degrees from the worst thing to the best thing, but taking these latter thoughts till we finally get where we want to go. Next, use time blocking and workload planning to reduce emotional overload, especially for introverts and judging types. So, what can we do to help people, again, introverts? Are they dealing with overload? Are they dealing with overwhelm because of the amount of people they're being surrounded by? They feel as though they're being bombarded. And judging types need that structure, the planning, knowing specifically what's expected of them. Next, strengthen emotional intelligence in daily interactions. So how can you help them with, again, offering emotional intelligence, programming resources? Next, practice active listening and perspective taking to improve emotional understanding of others. And it just occurred to me as I was reading this list that all of you who are listening are also individuals in the workplace. So you may or may not relate to the boss pieces that I talked about at the beginning, those suggestions, but you can all do these things for yourself. So active listening, perspective taking, looking at seeing the situation through the other person's eyes. to improve your ability to understand others. Next, seek feedback from coworkers about your interpersonal impact and adjust behaviors accordingly. So seek out the feedback. Ask people that you believe will be on and tell them you want them to be completely honest with you. Be prepared. Next, create routines that support mental and physical energy, right? What is your, like, oh, perfect example. And I had a client reach out to me over the holidays and she said, because I send my calendar invite out to schedule the next step in whatever I'm working with the client. And she said, do you have any 9 a.m. appointments? I'm a morning person. And I wrote her back and I said, I too am a morning person and I reserve the first 2 hours of every day. So everything before lunch is for writing. That is what I have trained myself to do. It actually feels very weird when I come into my office, which is actually what I'm doing right now, but it's New Year's Eve, so it's a little bit of a different situation. But I am my body is trained, my brain is trained to write the first 2 hours of every day. All right. Next, establish boundaries between work and rest, particularly in hybrid or remote work environments. And I think this is something that really needs to be at the corporate level as well, right? Helping people to you aren't in the office 3 days a week, ever in the office, that there still needs to be boundaries. There still needs to be a time when you turn off the computer and turn off the business aspects of your life. Next, ensure regular breaks, movement, and non-work social connections. And I think this one is really important in a remote work environment. So when I'm working, especially when I'm writing, I set my clock on my phone for 55 minutes. I turn my phone over. It does not make, I have all sounds turned off on my phone. It does not make a sound. I turn the phone over and I work my butt off for 55 minutes without a break. But then I get that break and I know it's coming, right? So I work really hard. I'm not, there's this sense of, maybe I want to get to a certain place. I want to accomplish a certain amount before that 55 minutes is up. So it really, really makes me work harder. So regular breaks, movement, right? So you take that break after the 55 minutes and get up and move around. And non-work social connections. Do you have that balance so that you are seeing your friends outside of work? Next, seek tailored support aligned with personality strengths and vulnerabilities. So this again gets back to, do you need more alone time? Do you need more, like, we've talked about introverts needing that alone time. It's equally true that extroverts, if they are put in a back office to work by themselves for any length of time, that's going to be very difficult for them. So how can you support yourself and advocate for yourself based on your personality strengths, your vulnerabilities, that kind of thing? And then for introverts, and I kind of alluded to this a moment ago, schedule downtime after high interaction periods. A great example is if you've got an all hands meeting all day on a Friday, let's say, and your significant other wants you to go to a party Friday night, I can hear the introverts listening to this groaning right now. I know you are like, oh no, 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 no. I need my significant other to go to the party and I need to be like alone, completely alone. So know that about yourself and plan that. For feeling types, those who make their decisions with their heart, ensure that you are in alignment with your personal values in your work tasks or projects. And this was an interesting one for me because this was another kind of insight when I understood my Myers-Briggs type. I have never understood how people can work in certain jobs or certain fields, certain occupations, certain industries where there is, and I'm walking so carefully on how I want to say this. They are in a an industry, a type of work that is not, let's just say, virtuous. And it could be because of the product or service that is being sold or provided. It could be about how that product or service is provided, not the product or service itself. Or it could be the culture of the organization around, cutting corners or um, knowingly putting out faulty products, putting money over people. Those kind of things are not going to ever bring workplace well-being to a feeling type, ever. And then finally, for perceiving types, those who like a lack of structure, who want to be able to do things in their own way, you want to allow flexibility in how your goals are achieved. So the boss says, "Okay, here's the end goal." And this is a tip for all of you who supervise perceivers or think they might be perceivers, and what your cues are. Office is a kind of a mess, might be a mess. They know where everything is, but it's like I can't even go into a perceiver's office. It stresses me out. They don't put a lot in their calendar if they even have one. They do things at the last minute because that burst of energy is when they do their best work. And they do not have structure to their personal time. They put a minimal amount of structure in their work because they have to, and then it stops at the door. They don't want any of that in their personal life. So for perceivers, you want to make sure as a boss that you allow them flexibility in how their goals are achieved. If you tell them, here's the end result and here are the 23 steps I need you to take in order to accomplish this, you are not going to get your best results. And if the work that needs to be done requires that, literally, legitimately requires 23 steps in order, say you're building something and it'll fall apart and people will die, then you don't need perceivers having to lead those 23 steps, having to take care of them. It will not be a good fit. All right. This has been a lot I think this is one where hopefully there's a nugget in there for you. It feels like it was pretty dense content, but I found it very interesting. I've had that survey in my sort of queue to work on, and I kept going back to it to think, how do I want to approach this? Because I didn't want to get bogged down in numbers and percentages and meaningless to you, meaningful to me metrics. So I hope this has given you some food for thought, both on if I'm a leader, how can I help workplace well-being to move forward in my organization? And as an individual, what do I need to be thinking about to ensure my own workplace well-being? And again, some of those individual things needed leadership's sort of guidance and direction. So I hope that has given you some food for thought, as I like to say. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Don't forget the other podcast, The Exclusive Career Coach. Take care. Bye.